And so the primitive bipeds from the backwater planet somehow managed to not only survive but thrive. It's utterly preposterous, if you ask me, declared Ambassador Krell, his four nostrils flaring with indignation. These humans, as they call themselves, have accomplished in 50 years what took our species 7 centuries. I shifted uncomfortably in my seat, waiting for the inevitable moment when the ambassador would notice my presence. The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with heated discussions, and as the junior xenobiologist assigned to study Earth, I was about to become very unpopular. "Ah, Professor Zinn. Come here," Ambassador Krell bellowed, his thick purple appendage beckoning me forward. "Tell these fools what you have discovered about these hairless apes." "My name is Nix Zinn. I'm a xenobiologist from Proxima Centauri b, and I'm about to explain how the galaxy's most underestimated species became its most feared. Trust me, no one saw this coming. Not even me, and I have been studying humans for 20 years. Ambassador," I began, my voice cracking slightly. "The data suggests that humans are not, in fact, primitive at all. They are adaptable. Extraordinarily so." The chamber erupted in dismissive hoots and clicks. "Silence," commanded High Chancellor Tora, her luminescent tendrils glowing an angry orange. "Let the professor speak." I cleared my throat and activated my holo display. 50 years ago, when our scout ships first discovered Earth, we classified humans as a Class 3 civilization, technologically advancing but centuries away from true interstellar capability. We considered them harmless curiosities at best. Ambassador Krell snorted. "And now they control 7 major trade routes and have military outposts in 12 systems." "Explain that, Professor." "It's quite simple, really," I replied, though nothing about humans was ever simple. "We made 3 critical errors in our assessment." The holo display showed an image of Earth, a swirling blue-green marble suspended in the void. Error number 1. We assumed their biological limitations would mirror their technological limitations. The image zoomed in to show humans in various environments: desert, Arctic, underwater, even low-orbit space stations. Humans evolved on a planet with wildly fluctuating conditions. They can survive in temperatures from -40 to +50 degrees Celsius. They can go weeks without food, days without water. They sleep for only a third of their day cycle, and some can function on much less. So they are hardy pests, interrupted Delegate Vox from the Andromeda Coalition. "Many species are." "True," I nodded. "But most hardy species sacrifice intelligence for resilience. Humans sacrifice neither. Which brings me to error number 2. We underestimated their cognitive adaptability." The display shifted to show human cities, universities, and scientific facilities. Humans don't specialize. A typical human can learn multiple disciplines throughout their lifetime. They have doctors who are also engineers, soldiers who are also poets, leaders who were once laborers. When we introduced them to our galactic technology standards, we expected them to take generations to integrate this knowledge. They did it in less than a decade, grumbled Ambassador Krell. 9 years, 2 months, and 17 days, I corrected. They didn't just integrate our technology, they improved it. The Hansen folding drive that powers most of our modern ships, named after Lisa Hansen, a human who redesigned our propulsion systems to be 40% more efficient. High Chancellor Tora leaned forward, her tendrils now a curious yellow. "You mentioned 3 errors, Professor. What was the 3rd? I took a deep breath. This was the part that still frightened me. Error number 3, we failed to understand their social psychology, particularly their response to threats. The display showed footage from the Proxima incident, a day that changed galactic history forever. 20 years ago, a rogue Zilron mining corporation attempted to establish an illegal extraction operation in Earth's asteroid belt. When detected, they fired upon a human research vessel, killing all 63 crew members. The council chamber grew quiet. Everyone knew what happened next. The humans responded with what they called decisive force. Within 48 hours, they had mobilized a fleet of 30 ships constructed from converted civilian vessels. They didn't just destroy the mining operation. They traced the corporation back to its headquarters on Zilra Prime and demanded justice. They threatened orbital bombardment, hissed Delegate Vox. No, I corrected. They threatened to release evidence of the Zilran government's complicity in multiple illegal mining operations throughout the sector. It wasn't a military threat, it was an informational one. The Zilrans capitulated and turned over the corporate leadership for trial. The display switched to news headlines from across the galaxy: Humans force Zilran surrender, Earth diplomacy backed by steel, new species upends galactic order. After the Proxima incident, humans were invited to join the Galactic Council. We thought giving them a seat would contain them, force them to play by our rules. I couldn't keep the irony from my voice. Instead, they used their position to build alliances, establish trade networks, and gradually increase their influence. Ambassador Krell slammed his fist on the table. They are upstarts, barely out of their planetary cradle. And yet, I replied calmly, they now chair 3 major council committees and have veto power on security resolutions. High Chancellor Tora's tendrils had shifted to a thoughtful blue. How did this happen so quickly, Professor? Give us your expert analysis. I deactivated the holo display and faced the council directly. Humans are unique in one crucial aspect: they thrive on challenge. Most species evolve to fit comfortably within their environmental niche. Humans constantly push beyond theirs. They call it innovation, but really it's a form of productive restlessness. Are you suggesting we challenged them, and that led to their rise? Asked a voice from the back of the chamber. I recognized Admiral Pax, his metallic exoskeleton glinting under the lights. The military had been watching humans closely since they reversed-engineered our shield technology in a matter of months. Precisely, Admiral. The moment we revealed ourselves and showed them the vastness of the galaxy, we inadvertently triggered their most powerful evolutionary response: adaptation through competition. So what do we do now? Demanded Ambassador Krell. How do we contain them? I laughed, which was inappropriate but unavoidable. Contain them? That opportunity passed 20 years ago. Now we adapt to them. The chamber erupted again, voices shouting over each other. High Chancellor Tora silenced them with a flash of bright white from her tendrils. Professor Zinn, she said, you have studied humans longer than anyone. What do they want? Conquest? Resources? Neither, I said. At least not primarily. They want something both simpler and more complicated: recognition. Recognition? Echoed Admiral Pax. Of what? Of their status, their achievements, their potential. Humans have a concept they call our respect. They will go to extraordinary lengths to earn it, and even further lengths to keep it once earned. I pulled up a final image on the holo display, a human diplomatic event where representatives were signing the Orion Accords, establishing Earth as a major power. When we first encountered humans, we viewed them as curiosities, then as potential threats, then as reluctant partners. Now, many view them as rivals. I paused, looking around the chamber. I suggest we start viewing them as what they have proven themselves to be: equals. Perhaps even leaders in some domains. The silence that followed was deafening. I could practically hear the collective neural processes of the council as they absorbed this unwelcome recommendation. That's quite an assessment, High Chancellor Tora finally said, and potentially a controversial one. Admiral Pax stepped forward. The Military Intelligence Division has been monitoring human expansion patterns. Their behavior doesn't match typical conquest profiles. They fortify, yes, but they also connect. They don't just build military bases, they establish cultural centers, trade hubs, educational exchanges. Clever propaganda, sniffed Ambassador Krell. Perhaps, admitted Admiral Pax. But effective. 73 species have formed voluntary alliances with humans in the past decade. My own children watch their entertainment broadcasts and practice their languages. This revelation sent another ripple through the council. Cultural infiltration was often more powerful than military conquest, a lesson humans seemed to have intuited naturally. There's something else, I added, feeling I might as well empty the entire barrel of uncomfortable truths. The incident at Proxima showed another human trait we have consistently underestimated: their unified response to external threats. I brought up new data on the display charts showing human political divisions before and after first contact. Humans spent most of their history divided into competing nation-states. They fought wars, held grudges, built walls. But when we arrived, something fascinating happened. Their internal conflicts didn't disappear, but they became secondary to their species-wide agenda. Which is? Asked High Chancellor Tora. Survival, then security, then significance, I replied. They moved through these phases with remarkable speed. Ambassador Krell was still not convinced. They are still primitives with borrowed technology. Without our initial contact, they'd still be burning fossil fuels and fighting over imaginary borderlines. A voice spoke from the entrance to the chamber, a voice that didn't need amplification to command attention. Actually, Ambassador, we were already transitioning to renewable energy and establishing our first permanent lunar colony before your scout ships arrived. The council turned as one to see Lisa Hansen herself standing in the doorway. At 67 Earth years, she was in her species' middle age, though genetic treatments made her appear younger. Her dark skin contrasted with her silver hair, cut in the practical style favored by human scientists. Director Hansen greeted High Chancellor Tora, her tendrils rippling in what I recognized as nervousness. We weren't expecting Earth's representative until tomorrow's session. Hansen smiled, that uniquely human expression that could mean anything from friendliness to predatory intent. In my 20 years of study, I still couldn't always tell which was which. I arrived early and heard there was an interesting discussion about my species. Professor Zinn, it's good to see you again. I bowed slightly. Director Hansen, your timing is impeccable, as always. She walked to the center of the chamber with the confident stride that had become characteristic of human diplomats, not aggressive, but unquestionably purposeful. Chancellor, distinguished council members, I want to thank Professor Zinn for his insightful analysis. It's refreshing to hear a perspective that's both accurate and fair. Ambassador Krell couldn't contain himself. Fair? He's practically advocating for human hegemony. Hansen turned to him, her expression neutral, but her eyes sharp. Ambassador, with all due respect, the professor is advocating for reality. Humans aren't seeking hegemony. We are seeking partnership, but partnership based on mutual respect, not patronizing tolerance. She gestured to the holo display, which still showed the signing of the Orion Accords. 20 years ago, we were shocked to learn we weren't alone in the universe. 10 years ago, we were fighting for a meaningful place at this table. Today, we chair committees and help shape policy. Tomorrow? She shrugged. That depends on all of us, doesn't it? Admiral Pack stepped closer. Director Hansen, some council members are concerned about the rapid expansion of human influence. Perhaps you could address those concerns directly? Hansen nodded. Of course. Humans expand quickly because we are curious and adaptable. But we have learned from our own history that uncontrolled expansion leads to conflict. That's why we have voluntarily limited our military presence to defensive operations, focused our efforts on trade and cultural exchange, and consistently supported the Council's peacekeeping initiatives. Yet you maintain independent diplomatic channels with 73 species, noted High Chancellor Tora. As do the Arcturians, the Vega Collective, and your own Centauri Confederation. Hansen countered smoothly. The Council functions best when it represents a diverse network of relationships, not when it controls them. I watched this exchange with professional interest. Hansen was demonstrating classic human diplomatic strategy: acknowledge concerns, reframe the narrative, establish equivalence, and subtly remind everyone of the power dynamics at play. Professor Zinn, Hansen turned to me, you mentioned our response to threats. I think that deserves clarification. I nodded. curious to hear the human perspective on what I considered their most distinctive trait. Humans don't seek conflict, Hansen explained to the council, but we prepare for it obsessively. It's hardwired into us by evolution. On Earth, we had a saying, hope for the best, prepare for the worst. We apply this philosophy to everything from birthday parties to interstellar diplomacy. She smiled again, and this time I was pretty sure it was genuine amusement. When the Zilren Corporation attacked our research vessel, we didn't respond because we wanted revenge. We responded because we needed to establish a precedent. Threatening humans has consequences. Some would call that aggressive, said Ambassador Krell. Some would call it clarity, replied Hansen. In the 20 years since that incident, how many direct attacks have there been on human vessels or settlements? The ambassador fell silent. The answer was 0. Chancellor Tora's tendrils had shifted to green, a sign of acceptance, perhaps even approval. Director Hansen, the Council appreciates your candor. But I must ask, what are humanity's long-term goals within the galactic community? Hansen took a moment before answering, her expression thoughtful. Chancellor, humanity doesn't have a single long-term goal. We have billions of individual dreams and aspirations. But if I had to identify common themes, they would be these: to explore, to learn, to grow, and to ensure that our children inherit a galaxy that's more peaceful, more prosperous, and more full of wonder than the one we discovered. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes, optical sensors, and sensory organs of each council member in turn. We were the underdogs when we arrived on the galactic stage. We are still learning, still adapting. But we have proven ourselves to be valuable allies and formidable adversaries. All we ask is to be treated as such. As Hansen finished speaking, I realized that my 20 years of studying humans had taught me one fundamental truth. They were simultaneously the most predictable and most surprising species in the galaxy. And as I looked at the faces of the council members, I knew they were beginning to understand what I had learned long ago. The underdogs had arrived, and the galaxy would never be the same. The council chamber remained silent for exactly 7.3 seconds after Director Hansen finished speaking. I know because I counted. In xenobiology, we are taught that silence can be as informative as vocalization. This particular silence spoke volumes. Chancellor Tora was the first to break it, her tendrils now pulsing with a mix of green and blue. Thank you, Director Hansen. Your perspective is illuminating. As the formal session adjourned, I gathered my research materials, expecting to slip away unnoticed as usual. Xenobiologists rarely remain in the spotlight once our data has been presented. We analyze, others decide. Professor Zinn called a voice behind me. It was Hansen. Would you join me for a drink? I'd value your perspective on a developing situation. Ambassador Krell, passing by, made a dismissive clicking sound with his mandibles. More human scheming, no doubt. Hansen smiled politely. Ambassador, you are welcome to join us. In fact, I insist. I watched with fascination as Krell's 4 nostrils flared in surprise. Humans had an uncanny ability to disarm through unexpected inclusivity. It was a diplomatic tactic I'd documented in 17 separate instances. Very well, Krell grumbled, his enormous frame slouching in reluctant agreement. 30 minutes later, we were seated in a private chamber at the diplomatic quarter's most prestigious establishment, the Void's Edge. Through the transparent ceiling, 3 of Proxima's moons cast an ethereal glow over our gathering, which had mysteriously expanded to include Admiral Pax and 2 other council members I hadn't expected, Delegate Mira of the Tau Ceti Alliance and Senior Arbiter Juno from the Galactic Judiciary. But quite the impromptu assembly, Director, observed Admiral Pax, his metallic exoskeleton gleaming under the moonlight. Almost as if you anticipated today's discussion. Hansen laughed, a sound that still startled me even after years of studying humans. Not anticipated, Admiral. Prepared for. There's a difference. Always prepared, muttered Ambassador Krell. Always 3 steps ahead. It's unnatural. On the contrary, I interjected, professional curiosity overriding my usual caution. It's perfectly natural for them. Humans evolved as persistent predators and cooperative defenders. Planning ahead was essential for both hunting and protection. Hansen raised her glass, a gesture of acknowledgement. Professor Zinn understands us better than most. Though I suspect even he doesn't know why I have gathered you all here. She tapped her wrist device, and a holographic display materialized above our table, showing a star system I didn't immediately recognize. This is HD 219134, a star system 45 light-years from Earth. Uninhabited, unremarkable except for one thing, it lies directly in the path of what we believe is a shroud swarm. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. The shroud were not a species but a phenomenon and a nomadic hive of quantum-entangled particles that consumed energy in all forms, leaving dead stars and barren planets in their wake. The last confirmed shroud event had occurred over 3 centuries ago on the far side of the galaxy. Impossible, declared Delegate Mira, her bioluminescent patterns flashing in alarm. Our detection systems would have alerted the Council. They will, Hansen replied calmly. In approximately 6 days, when the quantum disruption becomes obvious enough for standard sensors to detect. Admiral Pax leaned forward, his mechanical eyes narrowing. How did you identify this threat before our networks? We didn't rely solely on standard detection methods, Hansen explained. 3 years ago, Earth established a project called Quantum Echo. Instead of looking for the shroud directly, we look for what's not there, the absence of expected quantum fluctuations that occurs before their arrival. Orbiter Juno, whose species communicated through modulated electrical discharges, crackled skeptically. That's theoretical science at best. It was, Hansen agreed, until we successfully tested it last year after studying historical shroud encounters. We have been monitoring potential approach vectors ever since. Ambassador Krell slammed a massive appendage on the table. And you kept this project secret from the Council? This is exactly the kind of unilateral action that concerns us about humans. I watched Hansen's reaction carefully. This was a critical moment, the kind that revealed true motivations and priorities. Ambassador, she replied, her voice steady. Quantum Echo was developed by a joint team of human, Arcturian and Rigelian scientists. We shared our findings with the Science Directorate 6 months ago. Krell's complexion darkened, a sign of embarrassment in his species. The Science Directorate did not share this information with the full Council. No, Hansen agreed, because the evidence wasn't conclusive. It still isn't, by Council standards. But we have reached 97% certainty. Why tell us now? I asked, genuinely curious. And why this particular group? Hansen's expression turned grave. Because HD 219134 is 45 light-years from Earth, but only 20 from Proxima Centauri b, your homeworld, Professor. And just 15 from Tau Ceti, Delegate Mira's system. If we are right, we have perhaps 3 weeks before the shroud begins affecting outlying planets. The implications hung in the air like a toxic cloud. The shroud didn't just destroy, they transformed reality itself in ways our science still couldn't fully explain. What does Earth propose? Asked Admiral Pax, cutting to the heart of the matter. Hansen tapped her device again, and the hologram shifted to show a complex array of satellites surrounding the HD 219134 system. Operation Firewall. A network of quantum disruption devices positioned to redirect the shroud's path away from inhabited systems. The energy requirements would be astronomical, noted Arbiter Juno. Electrical discharges intensifying. Yes, Hansen acknowledged. We would need to redirect power from approximately 60% of the combined fleet of all Council species. The room erupted in objections, exactly as I would have predicted. The idea of placing such critical infrastructure under what would essentially be human coordination triggered every political alarm bell in the Council's collective consciousness. Hansen let the protests continue for precisely 12 seconds before raising her hand. The room fell silent again, a testament to the authority humans had somehow accumulated in a mere 5 decades. I understand your concerns, she said. That's why Earth isn't proposing to lead this operation. We are proposing that Professor Zinn does. Every eye, optical sensor, and sensory organ in the room turned toward me. I felt my chromatophores involuntarily shifting to a pale yellow, the color of shock in my species. Me? I managed to stammer. I'm a xenobiologist, not a military commander or quantum physicist. You are the foremost expert on cross-species cooperation, Hansen countered. You understand not just human behavior, but how we interact with other species. This operation will require unprecedented coordination between civilizations that have historically distrusted each other. A clever ploy, snorted Ambassador Krell, appointing a non-human to lead, while humans undoubtedly control the technology. The quantum disruption technology will be fully transferred to Council control before the operation begins, Hansen replied. Complete technical schematics, no proprietary restrictions. This was unprecedented. Human technological advancement had been meteoric since first contact, but they had guarded their innovations jealously, sharing applications but rarely the underlying science. Why? Demanded Delegate Mira. Why would Earth surrender such an advantage? Hansen's answer was simple and devastating in its clarity. Because if we fail, none of our advantages will matter. The Shroud doesn't discriminate between humans, Centaurians, or any other species. A heavy silence fell over the room as the reality of the situation sank in. This wasn't political maneuvering or economic competition. This was survival, the most fundamental motivator for any species. Admiral Pax broke the silence. I will need to consult with my command structure, but speaking personally, I support the professor's appointment. As do I, added Delegate Mira, her bioluminescence now pulsing in a pattern that indicated deep thought. Arbiter Juno crackled reluctant agreement. The judiciary will not object, provided all legal protocols are observed. All eyes turned to Ambassador Krell, who seemed to be struggling with internal conflict. I will convey the proposal to my government, he finally conceded. And just like that, I found myself appointed as the potential savior of multiple star systems. The irony wasn't lost on me, a humble xenobiologist thrust into the center of galactic politics and existential threat response. As the meeting disbanded, I approached Hansen privately. This wasn't improvised, was it? You have been planning this for some time. Her expression remained neutral, but her eyes held a glint of what humans called amusement. Let's just say we considered various scenarios and response options, including my appointment? I pressed, including the recognition that non-human leadership would be essential for full council cooperation. She paused. Your specific selection was a calculated assessment of capability and acceptability. I couldn't help but laugh. You have been studying us as much as we have been studying you, haven't you? Of course, she replied with that enigmatic human smile. Wouldn't you? The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of activity that tested every aspect of council cooperation. Operation Firewall came together with remarkable speed, not without conflict, but with a unified purpose that transcended political boundaries. The human quantum engineers worked alongside Arcturian energy specialists and Rigelian materials scientists. Proxima Defense Forces coordinated with Tau Ceti navigators and countless other specialists from across the galaxy. And at the center of it all, I found myself not just observing human adaptability, but embodying it. I was forced to learn, adjust, and lead in ways I had never imagined possible. 7 days before the projected Shroud contact, I stood on the observation deck of the command vessel, looking out at the massive array we had constructed around HD 219134. Thousands of quantum disruption satellites positioned according to models that blended human intuition with Arcturian precision. Impressive, isn't it? Came a voice beside me. It was Vila Thomas, Earth's chief quantum engineer for the project. 50 years ago, we were still arguing about whether quantum entanglement could be maintained over interstellar distances, and now we are using it to divert a cosmic threat, I replied. The acceleration is unsettling. Thomas laughed. That's our specialty, unsettling the universe. But we couldn't have done this alone. Your coordination of the different species' efforts made the impossible merely improbable. Before I could respond, The ship's alert system activated. Shroud quantum signature detected, announced the automated voice. Estimated contact in 6 hours, 23 minutes. I rushed to the command center, where representatives from 12 species were already assembled. The mood was tense but focused, a far cry from the political posturing of the council chamber. Status report, I ordered, still somewhat uncomfortable with the authority I'd been granted. All systems operational, reported Admiral Pax, who had personally taken command of the defense fleet. Quantum disruption network at 98% synchronization. Energy reserves? I asked. Holding at optimal levels, replied the Arcturian energy director. We can maintain full output for approximately 12 hours. I nodded, reviewing the final simulations. According to our models, we will need approximately 4 hours of sustained disruption to alter the shroud's trajectory sufficiently. And if the models are wrong? Asked Ambassador Krell, who had insisted on being present despite the risks. Then we adapt, I said simply, consciously echoing the human approach that had brought us all to this point. The next 6 hours were the longest of my life. As the shroud approached, our sensors began to detect the reality distortions that preceded their arrival, space-time itself seeming to fold and ripple in ways that defied conventional physics. Disruption network activated, announced Thomas when the countdown reached 0, quantum field established. On our main view screen, the effect was almost beautiful waves of energy rippling outward from our satellite array, creating a barrier of altered quantum states that the shroud would find difficult to penetrate. For 3 hours and 17 minutes, everything proceeded according to plan. The shroud approached, encountered our disruption field, and began to divert along the path we had calculated. Then everything went wrong. Energy fluctuation in Sector 7, shouted an Arcturian technician. The shroud is adapting to our disruption pattern. Impossible, muttered Thomas. They are not sentient. They can't adapt. Evidently they can, I replied, watching as portions of our carefully constructed quantum field began to collapse. Admiral Pax moved to my side. Options, Professor? I stared at the data, mind racing. This was beyond my expertise, beyond anyone's expertise. We were witnessing behavior from the shroud that had never been documented before. Then I noticed something. The adaptation isn't random, I said slowly. There's a pattern to how they are breaking through our defenses. Thomas rushed to my console, studying the readings. You are right. They are targeting nodes with specific quantum signatures. Can we modify those signatures? I asked. Not remotely, not quickly enough, Thomas replied. We'd need to physically reconfigure at least 30 satellites in the affected sector. How long would that take? With shuttles. Hours. Too long. I looked around the command center, at the representatives of 12 species who had come together to face an existential threat. 50 years ago, most of these species had never heard of humans. Now, we were all depending on human technology to save us. But it would take more than technology now. It would take the other quintessentially human trait, impossible, reckless courage. The Hansen folding drive, I said suddenly. How precisely can it be calibrated for micro jumps? Thomas looked shocked. You are not suggesting. I am, I interrupted. We fold directly to each satellite, one after another, make the adjustments and fold out. The energy requirements alone would. We can divert power from the forward shield array, I said. We are not planning to engage the shroud directly anyway. Admiral Pax's metallic features somehow managed to convey alarm. No ship has ever attempted 30 consecutive precision folds. The navigational calculations alone would require a computational capacity we don't have. I finished for him. Unless. I turned to Ambassador Krell, whose species possessed the most powerful biological computational abilities in the known galaxy. Ambassador, your people could perform these calculations in real time, couldn't they? Krell's 4 nostrils flared. Theoretically, yes, but it would require at least 6 of us working in perfect synchronization. Can you do it? I pressed. There was a long pause before Krell replied. I will need to contact my ship immediately. Within 20 minutes, 5 additional members of Krell's species had transported aboard. They formed a biological computational array linking physically through specialized appendages to create what was essentially a living quantum computer. "This is untested," warned Thomas as we prepared for the first microfold. "If the calculations are off by even a fraction, we will be atomized," I finished. "I'm aware of the risks." As we initiated the first fold, I couldn't help but reflect on the irony of the situation. Here I was, a Proximan xenobiologist, using human technology interpreted through alien computation to save multiple species from an incomprehensible cosmic threat. The ship shuddered as the Hansen drive engaged. Space-time compressed around us, and for a brief, nauseating moment, reality itself seemed to blur. Then we were there, meters from the first satellite. "Reconfiguration team, go," ordered Thomas. Engineers in specialized suits burst from airlocks, swarming the satellite with practiced efficiency. Less than 2 minutes later, they were back aboard. Satellite 1 reconfigured, reported the team leader, 29 to go. What followed was the most harrowing 5 hours of my existence. Each fold brought its own unique horrors: spatial disorientation, temporal inconsistencies, and the constant fear that the next jump might be our last. By the 25th satellite, the strain was showing on everyone. Krell and his companions were bleeding from multiple orifices, the biological cost of their sustained computational effort. Thomas looked a decade older, her face lined with exhaustion. Even Admiral Pax's mechanical systems were showing signs of stress. But we continued. Satellite by satellite, adjustment by adjustment, we reconstructed our defensive line against the encroaching shroud. When the final satellite was reconfigured, we folded back to a safe distance and watched as our modified quantum disruption field engaged the shroud. For several agonizing minutes, the outcome remained uncertain. Then, slowly but unmistakably, the vast cosmic entity began to alter its course, turning away from populated systems toward the empty void between galactic arms. The command center erupted in cheers, twittering, flashing bioluminescence, and various other species-specific expressions of relief. I found myself embraced by Thomas, an unexpected but not unwelcome human gesture of camaraderie. "We did it," she whispered, voice hoarse with exhaustion. "No," I corrected gently. "We all did it. Together." As we returned to Proxima Centauri, news of Operation Firewall's success spread throughout the galaxy. The full council convened in emergency session to receive our report and determine next steps. Chancellor Tora's tendrils glowed a vibrant purple, a color I had never seen her display before. "Professor Zinn, on behalf of the Galactic Council, I extend our profound gratitude for your leadership in this crisis." I bowed in acknowledgement, then straightened. "Chancellor, the credit belongs to all species who participated, particularly to Earth, whose technology and foresight made our success possible." Ambassador Krell, still recovering from his computational ordeal, spoke up. "Much as it pains me to admit it, the professor is correct. Without human innovation and without the professor's willingness to adapt their approach to include our biological computation, the outcome would have been very different." High Chancellor Tora nodded slowly. "Perhaps it is time we reconsider our perspective on humanity's role in the galactic community." And so it was that 50 years after humans had been discovered and classified as a Class 3 civilization, the Galactic Council unanimously voted to elevate Earth to Class 1 status recognition as one of the founding species of the next phase of galactic governance. As I watched Director Hansen accept the formal proclamation, I reflected on my 20 years of studying humans. I had documented their adaptability, their cognitive flexibility, their unified response to threats. But in the crucible of crisis, I had witnessed something more fundamental: their ability to inspire the same qualities in others. Humans hadn't become the galaxy's alpha species through conquest or technological superiority alone. They had achieved it by making everyone around them better, more adaptive, more innovative, more collaborative. The underdogs hadn't just risen to the top. They had brought the entire pack with them. and as I looked out at the assembled representatives of 100 worlds, I knew that the galaxy was stronger for it. We all were.